My husband spent our vacation fund on a motorcycle and called it an investment. I thought I was overreacting when I saw the bank statement, but honestly, that turned out to be the least of my problems. Because right around the same time, our 16-year-old son decided to detonate a bomb in the middle of our marriage. Let me back up. I'm a 38-year-old man married for 17 years. We have two kids, a boy and a girl. Our son, let's call him Jake, just turned 16 in August. He's a typical teenager, mouthy, messy, obsessed with video games, and definitely not a saint. I knew he was sexually active. He'd actually come to me a few months earlier and asked for condoms. I wasn't thrilled, but I respected him being responsible. I gave him a box and told him to be smart. So when we got that call 3 weeks ago, I thought my heart was going to stop. It was Jake's ex-girlfriend's parents. They said their daughter Emily was 16, almost 17, and she was pregnant. She was already starting to show. The timeline lined up with when Jake and Emily had been together. They broke up about a month before. My wife Sarah and I went into full panic mode. We waited a couple days to tell Jake, partly because we didn't know how, partly because we were still hoping it was some kind of mistake. When we finally sat him down in the living room, Jake looked at us like we had two heads. "It's not mine," he said flatly. "I never fucked her." I blinked. "Jake, I know you're active. I gave you protection myself." "I know, Dad, but we never did it. I mean, we did other stuff, but not that." Sarah's face went tight. "You're lying," she said. "You're just scared. You're a kid. You made a mistake, but you need to take responsibility." Jake got angry, really angry. He stood up, fists clenched. "I'm not lying. We never had sex. I swear on my life." I had a heart-to-heart with him later, just me and him in the garage. He told me he'd cheated on Emily with a boy from his soccer team. He said the whole relationship with Emily was a cover, and he never actually went all the way with her because he wasn't into it. He said they only did oral, and it was unsatisfactory for both of them, so they just stopped trying. He said he always used condoms even for that, and he'd asked me for restocks, so I knew he was telling the truth about being careful. I hate to say it, but I believed him. My son is a shithead in a lot of ways, but he's not stupid. He knows how babies are made, and the way he described his feelings about Emily, it was like he was describing a friend, not a girlfriend. I started to wonder if maybe he was right. Sarah didn't buy it for a second. She said I was enabling him, that I was part of boy culture, that I was letting him weasel out of fatherhood. We had huge fights about it. She said the baby was clearly his and we needed to start planning for a grandchild, financially, emotionally, everything. I told her we needed to wait for a paternity test. She said that would be cruel to Emily. That was when things started to feel off. A few days later, both families met at Emily's parents' house. It was tense. Sarah walked in and immediately started talking about solutions, funding, how we could support the baby. She acted like Jake was already a dad. Jake sat there boiling and finally he spoke up. "I told you it's not mine. We never had sex. I'm not the father." Emily's mom snapped back. "Then who is Jake?" Jake took a deep breath, and then he said something I'll never forget. "I cheated on Emily with a guy. I'm gay, okay? I've been dating a boy from my team for 6 months. Emily and I never had intercourse. If she's pregnant, it's not mine." The room went dead silent. Emily's face turned white. Sarah looked like she'd been slapped. I just sat there, my head spinning. My son had just come out to a room full of people, including his ex's parents at a crisis meeting. Emily started crying. Her mom held her, and then Emily's dad looked at his daughter. "Is this true? Did you two never?" Emily nodded barely. "We only did stuff like, not real sex. He never wanted to. I thought it was because he was nervous." That was when I saw Sarah's expression change. It wasn't shock or hurt. It was something else, something cold and calculating. She looked at Emily and said, "Then who is the father?" Emily hesitated. Her mom stepped in and said, "We don't know yet. She won't tell us." I stared at Sarah. She was still acting like this was Jake's problem, even after he came out. Even after Emily admitted they never had sex. My wife was pushing for my gay son to be labeled the father of a child that wasn't his. That night, after we got home, I confronted her. I asked her why she was so determined to make Jake responsible. She got defensive. She said I was a bad father, that I was letting Jake run wild, that she was the only one thinking about the family's reputation. I told her I didn't care about reputation, I cared about the truth. She didn't answer. The next day I started digging. I called Emily's parents again, asked if there was anyone else she'd been with. They said they didn't know, but she'd been secretive about her phone. I started to wonder if maybe Sarah knew more than she was letting on. I remembered how quickly she jumped to blame Jake, how she'd refused to consider any other possibility. I remembered the way she looked at Emily, almost like she was protecting her. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were falling into place. That's when I found the old texts. Sarah's phone was on the counter while she was in the shower. A message popped up from an unknown number. Emily says she told her parents. What do we do? My hands were shaking. I opened the thread. There were dozens of messages between Sarah and someone named L going back months. They were talking about Emily's pregnancy before we even knew about it. They were discussing how to handle Jake, how to make sure he took responsibility. And then I saw the real kicker. One message from Sarah to Elle said, "He'll never know the baby is yours. Just let him think it's Jake's. It'll be easier for everyone." Elle replied, "You're right, just keep pushing." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The mother of my children was conspiring to pin a pregnancy on our own son, and the father, I didn't know who Elle was, but I was about to find out. I didn't scream, I didn't even confront her right then. I just sat there staring at the phone, waiting for her to come out of the bathroom. When she did, she saw my face and froze. "What's wrong?" she asked. I held up the phone. "Who is Elle?" She went pale. She tried to grab it, but I pulled away. "Who is Elle, Sarah?" She didn't answer. She just started crying. And I realized in that moment that everything I thought I knew about my wife, about my marriage, about the vacation fund she drained for a motorcycle she called an investment, it was all a lie. But that story, the motorcycle thing, that was just the beginning. The real mess was still unfolding. And I was about to find out that my wife's secrets went a lot deeper than a garage full of chrome. I set the phone down on the counter. My hands were still shaking. Sarah was standing in the bathroom doorway, wrapped in a towel, water dripping from her hair. She looked at me, then at the phone, and I watched her face shift from confusion to fear. "Who is Elle?" I asked again. She didn't answer. She just stood there, mouth open like a fish gasping for air. I picked up the phone and started scrolling through the messages again. There were dozens, months of them. They talked about Emily like she was a pawn in some kind of game. They talked about Jake like he was an obstacle, and they talked about the baby like it was a problem that needed a solution. I found the part where they discussed the plan. Elle said, if we can just get him to agree to a DNA test early before she's too far along, we can push for child support. It'll be easier than dealing with my wife. Elle had a wife. Elle was married. I looked at Sarah. "Who is Elle? Is it someone from your work, one of your friends?" She started crying harder. Not the kind of crying you do when you're sad, the kind you do when you've been caught. The kind that's supposed to make you feel sorry for them. I didn't feel sorry for her. "I can explain," she said. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it." She took a shaky breath. He's someone I met online a few months ago. We got close. He was having problems with his wife and I was having problems with you. We just talked. And then one day Emily's mom called me, said Emily was pregnant. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. Elle said if we could make Jake take responsibility, it would be easier. He said his wife would never find out. I stared at her. "You're having an affair and you tried to pin a pregnancy on our son to cover it up." "I wasn't trying to cover anything up. I was trying to protect us. You don't understand. You've been so distant. You're always working, always on your phone." I felt alone. Elle made me feel wanted. And when Emily got pregnant, I thought maybe it was a sign. Maybe if Jake took the baby, we could raise it together, fix our marriage. I almost laughed, almost. "You wanted to raise your lover's child with me while pretending it was our son S." She didn't answer. I walked out of the bathroom. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, a jacket. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house another second. I drove for an hour, ended up at a diner off the highway, sat in a booth and ordered coffee I didn't drink. I thought about the vacation fund, the one we'd been saving for 3 years, the one Sarah had drained to buy that motorcycle she called an investment. I thought about how she'd cried when I confronted her, how she'd said I didn't support her dreams. How she'd made me feel like the bad guy for wanting a family trip. Now I knew. The motorcycle wasn't an investment, it was a cover. She'd been funneling money to Elle, helping him buy parts for his project bike. The motorcycle in our garage was his, not ours. She'd been paying for his hobby while I worked double shifts. I called my brother. He didn't answer. I called my mom. She didn't answer either. So I just sat there, watching the clock on the wall tick past midnight, trying to figure out how to tell my 16-year-old son that his mother had tried to ruin his life. That was the day I found out my husband was also hiding a secret. But his secret was different. His secret was about his ex-wife. I'm 27. My husband Peter is 37. We've been married for 3 years, together for 6. He has an ex-wife named Allison, same age as him, divorced about a year before we met. We adopted our son Jack when he was 4. Jack is 7 now, and I love him like he's my own blood because he is. He's mine in every way that matters. Peter is bisexual. I've always known, and I've never had a problem with it. I did have a problem with his family. They're homophobic, his mom especially. She's always hinting that Peter should get back together with Allison. She says things like, "You two were so good together and maybe you just needed a break." She never accepted our marriage. She never even called me her son-in-law. I tried to ignore it, for Jack's sake, for Peter's sake. I told myself that his family was his problem, not mine. But then Jack's 7th birthday came around and we decided to have a party at Peter's parents' house, closer to his side of the family. I didn't want to, but Peter said it would be good for Jack to see his cousins, so I agreed. The party was supposed to start at 2 in the afternoon. We got there at noon to set up. I was decorating tables with Jack's favorite superhero theme when Peter's mom came up to me with that smile, the one she gets when she's about to do something terrible. "Oh, by the way," she said, "I invited Allison. She's still part of the family, you know." I felt my stomach drop. "You invited your son's ex-wife to my son's birthday party? She's Jack's aunt technically, and she wanted to see him." I looked at Peter. He was setting up the bounce house in the backyard. He hadn't heard any of it. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I wanted to grab Jack and leave, but I didn't, because it was his birthday and I refused to ruin it. So I smiled, I nodded, and I spent the next 2 hours playing with Jack and his cousins, trying not to think about Allison showing up. At 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I saw Peter's mom open the door, and there she was, Allison, with a gift in her hand and a smile on her face. She walked right past me like I didn't exist, went straight to Jack and said, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I got you the Lego set you wanted." Jack's eyes lit up. He didn't know the history, he just saw a nice lady with a gift. So he hugged her and I felt something crack inside me. The party continued. I kept myself busy. I cut the cake, I opened presents, I took photos, but I kept noticing that Peter and Allison were nowhere to be seen. I asked his mom where they were. She shrugged, probably catching up. That's when I went inside. I checked the living room, empty, the kitchen, empty. I walked down the hallway past the guest rooms until I got to Peter's old bedroom. The door was closed. But I could hear something, muffled voices, movement. I opened the door, they were undressing, his shirt was off, her hands were on his belt, they froze when they saw me. Peter's face went white, Allison just looked annoyed. I stared for what felt like a full minute, then I closed the door, walked back to the party and kept celebrating Jack's birthday. I was in shock, I was broken, but I refused to make Jack's day about me. When the party ended, people started leaving. That's when Peter and Allison finally came out. He walked up to me all red-faced and defensive and said, "You shouldn't have cut the cake without me, that was disrespectful to my mother." I looked at him. "I'm sorry. Just thought you'd be too busy getting into your ex-wife's pants." He shut up. I grabbed Jack, packed the car and left. We stayed at a hotel that night. Jack didn't understand why we weren't staying at Grandma's. I told him I wasn't feeling well. He accepted that. Kids are trusting like that. That's when I found out the rest. The stuff Peter had been hiding, the vacations he took without me, the late nights at work, the credit card bills I'd been ignoring. But that's a story for another time. Right now, I need to figure out what to do next, because my husband cheated on me with his ex-wife, and his mother helped him do it. And I'm sitting in a hotel room with my son, wondering if our marriage is even worth saving. Speaking of secrets and invasions of privacy, let me tell you about what happened at my office. Because right now I'm sitting in a hotel room with Jack, watching him sleep, and I can't stop thinking about how Peter's family treated me like I was invisible. And that reminded me of Melinda. I work in a corporate office, been there for 9 years, worked my way up from assistant to project manager. I'm notoriously private. I believe in a clear separation between work and home. I never ever talk about my personal life. Not because I'm ashamed, I'm married, I have twin daughters, I own a house, I kayak, I climb mountains. But that's mine, work is work, I go in, I do my job, I come home, I don't need my coworkers knowing about my kids' dance recitals or my husband's snoring. So for 9 years nobody knew I was even married. They knew I was an enigma, that was fine with me. I had great friendships at work, we talked about sports, movies, politics. You don't need to know someone's family tree to be friends, but then Melinda was hired. Melinda came in about a year ago. She was friendly, sure, too friendly. She made it her mission to get close to everyone in the office. At first I thought she was just trying to fit in. But then I noticed she remembered every detail everyone told her. She stored it like ammunition. She mentioned someone's divorce in a way that made them uncomfortable. She'd bring up a coworker's kid's allergy at a potluck to show she knew. She was a snoop. I kept my distance. When she asked me what I did over the weekend, I'd say not much and move on. When she asked if I had kids, I'd change the subject. She got frustrated, I could see it in her eyes. Then last Friday, she came into work looking like the cat who got the goldfish. At lunch, she announced to everyone in the break room, "Did you know that our little enigma is married with 2 daughters, a dog, and a nice house? He plays softball, kayaks, and mountain climbs, and he's on Facebook under a shortened name." Everyone turned to me. I didn't say anything. I just stared at Melinda. She was grinning. I reported her to HR that afternoon. I documented everything, the announcement, the invasion of privacy, the hostile atmosphere. I told them she had used White Pages or some other service to find my personal information. My boss, who I respect, told me he'd handle it, but Melinda didn't stop. The next week I found out I had cancer. I'm not saying that for sympathy, I'm saying it because it's relevant. I was diagnosed with a treatable form, but still, it rocked me. I told my boss and a few close coworkers, asked them to keep it quiet because I still wanted to work. I had a huge project coming up. My boss handed me the most important assignment of my career. He said, "If anyone can handle it, you can." I took the project. I was going through chemo, losing hair, working from home when I could. I didn't tell Melinda anything, but she figured it out. She started dropping hints in meetings. "How are you feeling? You look tired." Passive-aggressive, trying to undermine me. Then the project got delayed, not my fault, supplier issue. But Melinda went to our boss and claimed I wasn't pulling my weight because of my personal issues. She said I should be replaced. She said I was a liability. My boss called me in. He looked me in the eye and said, "I know what Melinda is doing. I've seen her pattern before. She's done this to 3 other employees in the past year. She tries to collect information and then use it to destroy people. You're not the first, but you'll be the last." He fired her. He had enough documentation from other complaints. She left the building crying, and our boss promoted me to senior project manager. I still have cancer. I'm still fighting. But I learned something from all of this. Privacy isn't about hiding. It's about protecting what matters. Melinda tried to weaponize my personal life, but it backfired because my work spoke for itself. Now I'm in this hotel room thinking about Peter and Allison. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I'm not going to let anyone treat me like I'm invisible again, not his family, not my husband, not anybody. But as much as I thought I had it bad, I heard another story that made me realize betrayal can come from the most unexpected directions. Sometimes the person you think is lying is actually telling the truth, you just don't want to hear it. My son just turned 16, he's a good kid mostly. He's got that teenage arrogance, sure, but he's respectful, does his homework, stays out of trouble, or so I thought. About a month ago, he broke up with his girlfriend. She's almost 17, smart girl, comes from a good family. They'd been together for about a year. I liked her. My wife loved her. We thought they were cute together. Then the breakup happened and my son was moody for a week, but he bounced back. Typical teenage drama, we figured. 3 weeks later, we got a call from her parents. They wanted to meet, urgently. We went over that evening. Her mom was crying. Her dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. They sat us down and said, she's pregnant, about 2 months along, the dates line up with your son. My wife went pale. I felt my stomach drop. We sat there in silence for what felt like an hour. Then we started talking logistics, doctor's appointments, financial support, whether they'd keep it or not. It was a blur. We went home and told our son the next day. He was playing video games in his room, headphones on, completely oblivious. We sat on his bed and broke the news. He pulled off his headphones and said, wait, what? She's pregnant? That's not mine. I never fucked her. I didn't believe him. I knew he was active. He'd come to me a few months back asking for condoms and I'd given him a box. I'd even lectured him about responsibility. So when he said they never had sex, I thought he was lying to save his skin, but he kept insisting. He got angry. He said, Dad, I swear we never did it. I always wrapped up when I was with her, but we never actually did it. I cheated on her, okay? I'm a shithead, I know, but I never slept with her. I had a heart-to-heart with him later that night. He broke down. He told me they'd only ever done oral stuff and he said it was unsatisfactory, so he never went further. Then he confessed he'd been seeing someone else on the side. I was furious. I called him a little shithead and said he disrespected that girl. But I also started believing him. My wife didn't. She was convinced he was lying. She said, boys will be boys, but he's just trying to avoid responsibility. She called me part of the boy culture for taking his side. She was furious. We had a joint meeting with her parents. My wife started by accepting paternity, talking about custody arrangements and financial plans. My son spoke up again, said it wasn't his and that they'd never had intercourse. He was genuinely angry, not defensive. Then he made a comment that I had to rephrase for the room. He said they only ever did that one thing which can't get a girl pregnant and it wasn't good enough for him to want more. The ex-girlfriend admitted they'd rarely done anything. She described one specific event, the when and where, and honestly it sounded believable. But my son's story had its own details. I was stuck. My wife yelled at me that night. She said I was enabling him, that I was part of the problem. She said she was ashamed of me. I thought I was overreacting, but maybe I wasn't. The next few weeks were hell. Her parents wanted my son to take a paternity test. He agreed. He was confident. That worried me even more. If he was lying, the test would expose him and our family would be destroyed. But if he was telling the truth, then the girl had been with someone else. The test came back negative. He was not the father. My wife didn't apologize. She doubled down. She said, fine, he's not the father, but he still cheated on her and he's a horrible person. I agreed he was a shithead for cheating, but I was also proud of him for telling the truth. Then came the real confession. A few days after the test, my son came into my home office, closed the door and said, Dad, I need to tell you something. The person I cheated on her with, it's a guy, I'm gay. I sat there stunned. He was crying. He said he'd been scared to tell us, especially with how his mom was acting. He said he'd only dated the girl to try to be normal, but he couldn't do it anymore. I hugged him. I told him I loved him. I said, you're still a shithead for cheating on her, but I'm proud of you for coming out. We'll figure this out. My wife didn't take it well. She cried for days. She said, how could you not tell me? I've been saying he's a liar and he's not. I've been making you out to be the bad guy. She blamed herself. She blamed me. She blamed him. It took months for her to accept it. She still has moments where she asks if it's just a phase. But we're working on it. Our son is happier now. He's seeing a therapist and he's got a boyfriend he actually likes. The ex-girlfriend had an abortion and her family moved away. It was messy. But that moment when the paternity test came back negative, that was when everything changed. I realized that sometimes you have to trust your kid even when the evidence points the other way. And I learned that my wife's need to be right almost destroyed our relationship with our son. I'm not saying I handled it perfectly. I called my son a dog, I raged at him, I let my wife's anger cloud my judgment. But in the end, I believed him. And that made all the difference. I sat in that hotel room for a long time after I took Jack to bed. He was sleeping peacefully, clutching his little stuffed dinosaur. I didn't know how to tell him his dad was a liar. I didn't know how to tell him I might not be coming home. Peter called me 6 times that night. I didn't pick up. He texted, we need to talk. You're overreacting. It was a mistake. She came on to me. I was weak. Each message made me angrier. At 2 a.m. I finally texted back, I saw you taking your clothes off. There's no mistake. I'm staying at a hotel with Jack. Don't contact me until I'm ready. The next morning I called my sister. She cried. She said, I never liked that family. She offered to fly out and help. I told her I needed to think. I went back to our house 3 days later. Peter was sitting at the kitchen table, head in his hands. He looked like he hadn't slept. He started talking before I even sat down. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. I was stupid. She came on to me and I didn't stop. It meant nothing. I love you. I said, you love me? You were about to sleep with your ex-wife at our son's birthday party while I was outside playing with him. What kind of love is that? He had no answer. He just cried. I felt numb. I told him I needed space, that I was going to stay with my sister for a while and that I was taking Jack. He begged me not to leave. I left anyway. A week later, I found out the real reason Allison had come to the party. She had a 1-4-year-old daughter, a daughter she had when she was 23 and Peter was 23. They were married then, she had the child and then they divorced. But here's the thing, Peter never told me about that child, he never mentioned her. I only found out because his mother let it slip during one of her guilt-tripping phone calls. She said, "You're breaking up a family that already had a child together. Allison's daughter needs a father." I hung up. I called Peter. I said, "You have a 1-4-year-old daughter and you never told me." He stuttered. He said, "I didn't think it mattered. She lives with Allison. I don't see her." I said, "You don't see your own daughter. What kind of man are you?" That was when everything changed. I realized he wasn't just a cheater. He was a liar and a deadbeat. He had a whole other life he'd hidden from me. And Allison, she was grooming him, trying to get him back for her daughter's sake. But Peter was 37, not 23. He made his own choices. I filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Peter tried to fight it. He said he'd change. He said he'd go to therapy. He said he'd cut off his family. I told him it was too late. I couldn't trust him. I couldn't look at him without seeing him with her. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I got custody of Jack. Peter gets supervised visitation. His family still blames me. They say I broke up the family. But I know the truth. I walked away from a man who didn't deserve me. Looking back, I think about that moment at the birthday party. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just walked away and cut the cake. I held it together for my son, and that's what I'm most proud of. I protected him from the mess even when my own heart was shattering. I tell this story now because I want people to know you don't have to stay, you don't have to forgive. You can walk away from a liar and rebuild. It's hard. It's lonely, but it's better than living a lie. And as I think about Peter and his hidden daughter, I realize how much we hide from each other. Work, family, love, we all have secrets, but some secrets destroy everything they touch. That story about secrets and destroying everything hits close to home. I've got my own story about what happens when you try to keep your personal life separate at work and someone decides they have the right to expose it all. I worked in the same office for 9 years. I started in the mailroom, worked my way up to project manager. I was notoriously private, not because I was ashamed, I just believe in a clear separation between work and home. I never talked about my family, my hobbies, my weekend plans. If someone asked what I did over the weekend, I'd say not much and turn the question back on them. My coworkers called me an enigma. I liked it that way. I'm married to a man named Matt. We have twin daughters, Lily and Rose, who were 6 at the time. I also have a dog, a golden retriever named Gus. I play softball in a rec league, I kayak on weekends, and I've climbed a few mountains out west. None of that was anyone's business at work. We hired Melinda about a year before everything fell apart. She was friendly at first, the kind of new person who tries to make friends with everyone. But soon I noticed something off about her. She would linger by desks after conversations ended. She would ask follow-up questions about things people mentioned months ago. She kept a little notebook where she wrote things down. I avoided her as much as possible. She tried to get close to me. She'd offer coffee, invite me to lunch, ask about my evening plans. I always gave her the same polite deflection. "Thanks, but I've got a lot of work." "No plans. I'm fine, thanks." She didn't like that. One Friday, I came into work and Melinda was already at her desk, grinning like she'd won the lottery. At lunch, she called everyone over and said, "I found out something interesting about our mysterious friend here." She announced to the whole break room that I was married with 2 daughters, a dog, and a nice house. She listed my hobbies: softball, kayaking, mountain climbing. She said she'd found my Facebook page. I use a shortened version of my first name, Ali, and my married name is not common, but she'd used a people search site and matched my photo to the one in my employee badge. I stared at her. I felt like I'd been stripped in front of everyone. My coworkers looked stunned. Some looked impressed. Some looked uncomfortable. But Melinda was glowing. I didn't say anything. I just ate my sandwich and went back to my desk. That night I told Matt what happened. He said, "Why does it matter? You're not doing anything wrong." He didn't understand. It wasn't about shame, it was about control. I had worked 9 years to build a wall between my 2 lives and she had torn it down in a lunch break. I reported her to HR the next day. I explained the situation. The HR manager, a woman named Patricia, said, "She didn't share anything illegal, it's public information. We'll talk to her about respecting boundaries, but we can't do much more." I felt defeated. But then Melinda escalated. She started following me on social media. I blocked her. She started asking my coworkers about me. She found out my daughter's names, my husband's name, where I lived. She showed up at my softball game one Saturday. She stood by the fence and watched. I pretended not to see her, but I was furious. I went to my boss, a man named Hank. I told him the whole story. He sighed and said, "I know Melinda can be a lot. She's good at her job, though. I'll talk to her." Nothing changed. Then something happened that changed everything. I found out I had cancer, testicular cancer, caught early but still cancer. I needed surgery and follow-up treatment. I didn't tell anyone at work. I was assigned a massive project, the biggest of my career. My boss said it could make or break my advancement. I didn't want to lose that chance, so I kept quiet. Melinda found out somehow. Maybe she saw my medical leave request, maybe she overheard a phone call. She announced it at lunch one day in that same gloating tone. "Did you know our Ali has cancer? He's been hiding it." The room went silent. I looked at her. I didn't scream. I said, "That's my personal medical information and you had no right to share it." She shrugged. "People should know it's a serious condition." I walked out. I went to Hank's office and said, either she goes or I go. He said, I can't fire her for sharing information you posted publicly. I said, I didn't post my cancer. She got that from my medical file. That's illegal. Hank's face went pale. He said he'd look into it. The next few weeks were hell. My coworkers started treating me differently. Some were overly nice, some avoided me. One guy, Rob, whispered to me I went through something similar. I'm here if you need to talk. That was kind, but it also felt like everyone was watching me. Melinda was suspended for a week for accessing my medical records, but she came back and she was worse. She made snide comments about my work. She whispered about me to other people. I started looking for a new job, but the project I was working on became my obsession. I poured everything into it. I finished it 2 weeks ahead of schedule. My boss praised me. Melinda said, I guess cancer gives you motivation. I snapped. I said, you don't get to use my illness as a punchline. You're a toxic person and everyone knows it. She filed a complaint against me for harassment. I was put on a performance improvement plan. I realized the workplace had become hostile, not because of my cancer, not because of my privacy, but because of one person who couldn't mind her own business. And my boss in HR enabled her. I quit 6 months later. I found a remote job. I still play softball. My daughters are 9 now and I'm cancer-free. Matt and I are fine. I learned that some people will always try to tear down your walls. They think your privacy is their amusement. But I also learned that I don't have to stay in a place that doesn't respect me. I don't know what happened to Melinda, I don't care, but I always think about that moment when she announced my personal life to the break room. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just ate my sandwich and refused to give her the reaction she wanted. And that's the victory. I've heard people say that some secrets destroy families. I thought I knew what that meant, but I didn't. Not until I watched my own marriage crack open over a baby that wasn't my son's. I'm a father of 2. My son Noah just turned 16. He's a good kid, but like any teenage boy, he's a little reckless. He started dating this girl, Emma, when he was 15 and she was almost 17. They were together for about a year. They broke up about a month ago. I didn't ask too many questions. I figured it was young love, you know, it happens. Then about 3 weeks after the breakup, we got a call from Emma's parents. They wanted to meet. My wife, Linda, and I drove over to their house thinking maybe it was about some drama or maybe Emma was in trouble. When we sat down, her mom said, Emma is pregnant. She's about 3 months along. The dates line up with her relationship with Noah. My world tilted. I looked at Linda. She was already crying. I felt like I was going to throw up. We went home and didn't tell Noah right away. We needed time to process. 2 days later, we sat him down at the kitchen table. I said, Noah, Emma is pregnant. She says it's yours. He looked at us, dead serious, and said, it's not mine. I never fucked her. I didn't believe him at first. I knew he was sexually active. He asked me for condoms a few times and I gave them to him. I thought he was lying to get out of responsibility. But then he got angry. He started yelling, we never had sex. I cheated on her, okay, but we never did it. That stopped me. I said, what do you mean you cheated on her? He wouldn't say. He just said, I always wrap up, ask me for restocks. I've never been with her like that. I had a long heart-to-heart with him later that night, and I started to believe him. He was a shithead, sure. He cheated on his girlfriend, but he was adamant they never had intercourse. He said they only did a certain act that can't cause pregnancy. He didn't go into detail, but I could guess. And he said it was unsatisfactory, so he never went further with her. I told Linda what he said. She didn't believe a word. She said, he's lying to protect himself. You're falling for his boy culture nonsense. I said, he's our son. We have to consider the possibility. She got mad. She said I was enabling him. We had a joint meeting with Emma's family, both sets of parents plus the kids. Linda started off by saying, we understand Noah is the father and we want to work out a plan for support. Noah immediately interrupted. He looked at Emma and said, it's not mine. We never had sex. Tell them, Emma. Emma looked at the floor. She said, we rarely did it, but one time we did. I remember the date and the place. She gave the details. It was believable. She seemed certain. My heart sank. Maybe I had been wrong, but Noah kept saying, no, I was with someone else that night. I asked him what he meant. He broke down. He said, Dad, I'm gay. I was with a boy. That's who I cheated on her with. I'm sorry. The room went silent. Linda stared at him. Emma started crying. Emma's parents looked confused. I didn't know what to say. I just hugged my son. After that meeting, everything fell apart. Linda was furious at me for not believing Emma. She said I humiliated her in front of the other family. She said I destroyed our son's reputation by supporting his fantasy. She said if I kept this up, she would leave, but I stood by Noah. He came out to me completely. He told me he had been seeing a boy from school for months. They never had intercourse either. They weren't ready, but they did other things. He said he knew he was gay and had been struggling with it. I told him I loved him no matter what. Emma's family pushed for a DNA test. At 16 weeks, they did a prenatal paternity test. The results came back. Noah was not the father. Emma broke down and admitted she had hooked up with another guy after breaking up with Noah. She didn't know which one was the father. Turned out the other guy was the dad. She had been lying to cover her tracks. Linda still wouldn't accept it. She said the test could be wrong. She said Emma was a victim and we abandoned her. She said she couldn't be with a man who raised a son like that. She moved out 3 weeks later. I stayed with Noah. He's still processing everything. He's in therapy. He's out now and his friends have been supportive. Emma's family apologized privately, but they're dealing with their own mess. I don't know if my marriage will survive. Linda filed for divorce last month. She says I chose my son over her. I guess I did. I chose the truth. I think about that night when Noah came out. I held him and said, I believe you. He cried like a little kid. I realized then that sometimes the hardest thing is not to protect someone from the truth, but to stand beside them when they tell it. And that's what I'm doing. I don't know what comes next, but I'm not sorry. I thought my story was bad. A wife who couldn't accept her son was gay and that his ex-girlfriend lied about paternity, that wrecked my marriage. But then I talked to a coworker and he told me what happened to his friend. I couldn't believe it. And it made me realize that some betrayals don't just break a marriage, they reveal something sick underneath. His name is Mark. He's 27, married to a guy named Peter, 37. They'd been together 6 years, married for 3. Mark adopted Peter's son Jack, who was 7 at the time. Jack was the world to Mark. He loved that kid like his own blood. Peter was bisexual. Mark knew that. He had no issue with it. Peter's ex-wife Allison was also 37. They divorced a year before Mark and Peter met. The problem was Peter's family. They were homophobic. They never accepted Peter being with a man. They always told him he should go back to Allison, that he was just confused that a real marriage was with a woman. Mark tried to ignore it. They lived in another city, so they only saw Peter's family a couple times a year. Mark kept the peace for Jack's sake. Then came Jack's 7th birthday. They drove to Peter's hometown to celebrate with the extended family. Mark planned everything, the cake, the games, the presents. Jack was so excited. He wanted to show his cousins his new dinosaur toy. They arrived on a Saturday morning. The party was set for that afternoon at Peter's parents' house. Mark was helping blow up balloons when his mother-in-law, Carol, said, "Oh, I invited a special guest. Hope you don't mind." Mark didn't think much of it. He figured it was an old neighbor or something. Then Allison walked through the door. She was carrying a gift bag, smiling. Carol hugged her like she was family. Mark looked at Peter, who looked at the floor. Mark didn't want to ruin Jack's birthday, so he stayed quiet. He took Jack outside to play with the cousins. They ran around the yard, threw a football, ate hot dogs. Jack was laughing. Mark held it together. When it was time to cut the cake, Mark looked around for Peter. He wasn't in the living room. He wasn't in the kitchen. Mark asked Carol where he went. She shrugged and said, maybe he's upstairs. Mark went up. The door to Peter's old bedroom was half open. He heard voices, low, intimate. He pushed the door open. Peter and Allison were taking their clothes off. Peter's shirt was on the floor. Allison's bra was halfway undone. They froze when they saw Mark. Mark didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just turned around and walked back down the stairs. He went to the living room and cut the cake. He served Jack first. He helped open presents. He laughed when Jack made a funny face. Peter and Allison came down about 45 minutes later. Allison left without saying goodbye. Peter walked up to Mark, pulled him aside and said, "You shouldn't have cut the cake without me. That was disrespectful." Mark looked at him. He said, "I'm sorry. I just thought you'd be too busy getting into your ex-wife's pants." Peter went quiet. Mark took Jack and left. They went back to the hotel. Mark put Jack to bed, then sat in the bathroom and cried. He didn't know what to do. The next few days were a blur. Peter called and texted begging for forgiveness. He said it was a mistake. He said Allison had cornered him. He said he was weak. Mark didn't believe him. But he also didn't want to uproot Jack's life, so he said they'd try counseling. Peter agreed, but then his mother got involved. Carol called Mark and said, "You're ruining his life. He was never meant to be with a man. Allison is the mother of his child. You're just a phase." Mark said, "He's married to me. We adopted Jack together." Carol scoffed. "You adopted him, but he's not your blood. You'll never understand." Mark hung up. The counseling didn't work. Peter kept making excuses. He said Mark was too cold. He said Mark didn't understand his family. He said Mark was making him choose. One night, Mark went through Peter's phone while he was sleeping. He found texts between Peter and Allison. Allison had sent a photo of a teenage boy. She said, "He looks just like you." Peter replied, "I know, I'm sorry I wasn't there." Mark's blood ran cold. He scrolled up. There were messages from years ago before Mark even met Peter. Allison had given birth to a son when she was 14. Peter was 24. They had never told anyone. The boy was now 13. Mark woke Peter up. "Who is this kid?" Peter sat up. He looked at the phone. He said, "That's my son." Mark felt the floor drop. "Got a 14-year-old pregnant when you were 24. That's statutory rape." Peter said, "It wasn't like that. She said she was older." "She was 14, Peter. You were a grown man." Peter started crying. He said he was ashamed. He said his family covered it up. They paid for an abortion, but then Allison changed her mind. She had the baby. They gave it up for adoption, but recently Allison had tracked down their son and reconnected. Mark thought about Jack. He thought about everything. He realized Peter wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator, and his family enabled it. Mark filed for divorce the next week. He asked for full custody of Jack. Peter's family fought him. They said Jack should stay with his biological father. But Mark had proof of Peter's relationship with a minor. Carol tried to claim it was consensual, but the dates were clear. Peter was 24, Allison was 14. The judge granted Mark full custody. Peter got supervised visitation. Mark moved out of state with Jack. He changed his phone number. He blocked Peter's entire family. It's been a year. Jack is 8 now. He calls Mark Dad. He doesn't remember much about Peter. Mark hasn't told him the full story yet. Well, one day when he's old enough to understand. Mark told me this over lunch one day. I didn't know what to say. I felt sick. He said, I didn't think I'd survive it, but I did. I protect Jack now. That's all that matters. I thought about my own situation. My wife left because I believed my son over her. She said I chose him. I did, and I don't regret it because that's what parents do. We stand by our kids even when the truth is ugly, even when it costs everything. Mark taught me that some secrets destroy families, but some secrets once exposed free you. But not all secrets are about family. Sometimes you just want to keep your work life separate from your home life. I thought I was being smart. Turns out some people can't mind their own business. I started working at this office about 9 years ago. I was 38 then. Right from the start, I made a rule for myself. What happens at home stays at home. I'm not ashamed of my life. I'm just private. I've got twin daughters, a husband, a dog, a nice house. I play softball on weekends. I kayak in the summer. I go mountain climbing when I can. That's my world. My work world is different. I'm there to do a job, not to make a second family. My coworkers didn't get it. They loved talking about their spouses, their kids, their weekend plans. They'd ask me questions and I'd redirect. How was your weekend? Fine, yours? What does your husband do? He works. I know it sounded cold, but I made real friendships anyway. We talked about movies, sports, office gossip, just not my personal life. Then Melinda got hired. She came in like she owned the place. Friendly at first. Too friendly. She spent weeks getting close to everyone, learning their weak spots. She didn't gossip for fun. She collected ammunition. I watched her do it to other people. She found out that one guy was going through a divorce and used it to get him moved to a worse shift. She learned that a woman had a sick parent and then started hinting that the woman was unreliable. I gave her nothing. She tried. She'd ask about my weekend. I'd say quiet. She'd ask if I was seeing anyone. I'd say I keep my life simple. She'd laugh and call me a mystery. I didn't care, but she didn't give up. One Friday, she came into the break room at lunch with this look on her face. Like she'd just won something. She sat down and announced to everyone, I know all about you. I looked up from my sandwich. What? She smiled. I know you're married. I know you have twin daughters. I know you have a dog, a nice house. You play softball. You kayak. You climb mountains. I found your Facebook. Everyone stared at me. I kept my face neutral. Good for you, she kept going. Don't you want to know how I found you? Not really, she got annoyed. I used white pages. You use a shortened name on Facebook, but your real name is in public records. It was easy. I finished my sandwich. Okay, that was when I knew she was dangerous. I went to HR and reported her. I said she was invading employee privacy and creating a hostile environment. The HR lady nodded and said they'd look into it, but nothing happened. Melinda got a warning maybe. She hated me for it. Weeks passed. She dropped little comments. How are the twins? Did you go kayaking this weekend? She was trying to get a reaction. I didn't give her one. Then things got worse. Melinda started a rumor that I got my position because I was sleeping with a manager. That was a lie. I'd earned every promotion. I worked 10-hour days. I never took credit for someone else's work. I went to HR again. They said they'd investigate. They talked to Melinda. She denied it. They had no proof. I felt trapped. That's when I found out I had cancer. It was a routine checkup. I was 43 by then. The doctor said it was early stage, treatable, but I'd need surgery and chemo. I didn't tell anyone at work. I didn't want the pity or the gossip. I kept working. I scheduled my appointments around my shifts. I wore a hat after my hair started thinning. I said it was a new style. At the same time, my boss handed me the biggest project of my career. It was a multi-million-dollar client, high-profile, tight deadline. He said, I trust you. You're the only one who can handle this. Melinda was furious. She'd been angling for that project for months. She started spreading more rumors. She said I was hiding something. She said I was unstable. She told my boss that I'd been acting strange and that maybe I was on drugs. My boss called me in. He said, look, I don't believe her, but I need you to be honest with me. Is something going on? I sat there. I thought about lying, but I was exhausted. I took off my hat. My hair was patchy. I said, I have cancer. I'm in treatment, but I'm handling it. I can still do this project. He stared at me, then he said, why didn't you tell anyone? Because I don't want to be treated differently. I don't want gossip. I want to do my job. He nodded slowly. He said, you're the toughest person I've ever met. Keep the project. And if you need anything, you tell me, not HR. Not Melinda, me. I didn't cry then, but I did later in my car. Melinda didn't give up. She started digging into my medical records. I don't know how. Maybe she found a prescription bottle in my desk. Maybe she called my doctor's office pretending to be me. She cornered me in the break room and said, I know about the cancer. You're hiding it because you can't handle the work. You're a liability. I looked at her. I said, you're a parasite. She reported me to HR for harassment. HR called me in. I told them everything. The rumor about sleeping with a manager, the invasion of privacy, the medical records. I said, I've reported her multiple times. You did nothing. Now she's harassing me while I'm undergoing cancer treatment. What are you going to do about it? HR finally acted. They investigated. Melinda had been stealing company files. She'd been using her access to look up employee information without authorization. They found proof. They fired her. I thought I'd feel relief. I didn't. I just felt tired. I finished the project. It was a success. My boss gave me a bonus. I took 6 weeks off for surgery. I came back stronger. My twins are teenagers now. They know I kept work separate because I wanted to protect them. They didn't need to hear office drama. They didn't need coworkers asking about their grades or their hobbies. That was my choice. Melinda tried to apply for unemployment. She claimed she was wrongfully terminated. She lost. I heard she moved to another city. I still work at the same office. I still keep my personal life private, but I'm not as rigid. I talk about my kids sometimes. I told a coworker about my kayak trip last summer. It's fine, but I learned that boundaries aren't meant to be barriers. They're meant to be walls you control. Some people will try to knock them down. Melinda did, and I won. I think about Mark and how he protected Jack. I think about my own son and how I believed him. And now I think about those years at work where I kept everything locked up. Not because I was ashamed, because I knew what happened when people got too close. Melinda taught me that some secrets are worth keeping, and some people don't deserve to know them. I'm okay with that.